Now, joining us in the studio right here is Acie Lumumba, leader of the recently launched youth party Viva Zimbabwe, and Tino Mambeu from the Zimbabwe Exiles Forum. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to you. Some people would say it's been a dramatic week in Zimbabwe, and I just wonder from both of you, a view from exile and a view from inside Zimbabwe, what do we make of the sacking of Emerson Mnangagwa? Many people said, look, this has been on the cards for some time, so shouldn't have been a surprise. Let me start with you, Mr. Lumumba.
Right. I think what is happening in Zimbabwe is two things that people must pay attention to. One is the maturity of Zimbabweans. Zimbabweans are now more politically mature than they've ever been at any point in our history. You have more Zimbabweans having conversations about what is next for Zimbabwe than we've ever had. This is why you're starting to see Zimbabweans suggesting who should take over, when they should take over, how they should take over. But I think the second thing that has happened in Zimbabwe is you now have Mugabe trying to create a dynasty and the effect of that within his own party. The only reason you have a ZANU-PF and a fragmented opposition is because the opposition will not change the person who is leading the opposition. So because they will not change the person leading the opposition, it seems like there's a lot of fights. But there's not really a lot of fights. There's a fight between Mugabe and the people of Zimbabwe. What's stopping the people of Zimbabwe from moving forward is there is no more champion to go against this thing called ZANU-PF. But ultimately, there's a maturity. It's a maturity process where as a country, we are all growing up. We're now at a new stage of our democracy where we're starting to question the politics and we are about to change the politics. It's inevitable.
Okay, we'll explore that a little bit further. So I once heard an alarming statistic that the number of Zimbabweans that have left the country over the years is the biggest number proportionally during peace times. So there's a lot of Zimbabweans in the diaspora, a lot of Zimbabweans here in South Africa, and I'm just wondering, as an exile movement, how are you viewing what's happening back home, and are you hopeful that things might be changing, as Mr. Lumumba is suggesting, to a degree that there will be change in the country?
Well, first of all, I think it will be very fair to start by welcoming the former Vice President, Emerson Mnangagwa. We know that he has left the country. He might probably be in South Africa or wherever he is, but he has joined the many millions of Zimbabweans in the diaspora. And we welcome him. The events around his leaving the country are well noted. They've been well reported. And he's running away from a system that we have always said that this is a dangerous system. And as things stand, you might see a lot more Zimbabweans coming or going into the diaspora. ZANU-PF is a machinery that understands and uses violence to achieve its ends. Now, it does not know neighbor, or it does not know child, it does not know anybody when it comes to the threat of power being meted on Mugabe himself. So in the coming weeks, if the events continue to unfold under the way they are unfolding, you are going to see an influx of all Lacoste supporters, or Mnangagwa supporters. Remember, their leaders are already outside the country, and we will expect under normal circumstances.
But is he going to be wearing a ZANU-PF hat? What hat will he be wearing?
Well, what we think in terms of that is Mnangagwa, he has now joined Zimbabweans against a system. So we welcome him as a Zimbabwean who is now fighting a system that is anti-Zimbabwe.
Mr. Lumumba, you were ZANU-PF through and through. So what we've noticed over time, people get expelled, thrown out of the party, and suddenly they open their eyes and they have a second awakening and start these opposition parties. Aren't you just one of these guys?
I think what I have made my mistakes, like every other human being, and I acknowledged my mistakes while I was in the party. I acknowledged my mistakes to the extent where I said, this is not the future I want. That's why I left the party. You must be able to differentiate my story and Emerson Mnangagwa's story. I didn't get fired out of the party. I left the party because here's one thing ZANU-PF has done effectively since 1980. ZANU-PF has broken every promise it has made to the Zimbabwean people. All Zimbabwean people ever asked for, the only thing all Zimbabwean people across the world are asking for, is give us a promise that provides a pathway to prosperity. That promise was broken, and what we are all in search of right now is a new promise. And that new promise can only be delivered by my generation, and by a generation that understands our future is way more important than the history that ZANU-PF shackles us to.
So how are you going to do that? What are you doing to change this generational shift that's going to change Zimbabwe?
It's a couple of things. You know, one of the reasons I'm in South Africa is I'm engaging a lot with international organizations. Zimbabweans who are in the business sector here. I spend my day today with a business community led by Tafazo Muguti and Joseph Busha. And these guys are starting to look at methods of how do we organize the Zimbabweans in the diaspora so that when the tipping point, which is inevitable, takes place, we're all able to go back to Zimbabwe and we know where to begin. But my job on the ground, remember, I am the guy who is on the ground. I have 3 fundamental jobs. Job number 1, I have to get young people registered to vote. It's not a right for you to vote. It's a basic responsibility. Job number 2, I have to galvanize young people to understand we cannot be spectators to the political game. We have to contest for public office. Zimbabweans across the world have got the brightest ideas of how to move the country forward, and we can't leave that job to politicians. It's too risky, it's too dangerous. Job number 3, I have to play my part as Lumumba, and I simply have to keep doing what I'm doing right now. I have to talk to you, I have to continue talking to Zimbabwe, spreading the message that we can reimagine a new country only if we understand that the responsibility and the job is ours on task.
Mr. Mambeu, are people registering to vote, and are they going home to vote in the elections next year? Because the government is not going to enable you to vote in the diaspora, because they know that the reason that you've left to go into the diaspora is because you were not happy at home. So they're not going to bend over backwards for you. Are people prepared to go back to Zimbabwe, register and vote at home?
The job that we have carried forward as the Zimbabwean Exiles Forum is to try and engage the communities of Zimbabweans within the diaspora, especially in South Africa. We have been going to the farms, we have been going to the locations, we have been going to where we find our people, and we have spoken to them and we have said, we are trying to put mechanisms in place to ensure that especially now that the registration process is open, people must travel to the nearest border that is available. Because the system that we have now, it allows you to register anywhere in the country, though you will have to vote in your particular constituency. So what we are saying is we are putting measures across, and we are also appealing to the international community, donors, funders, and businesses alike to say we can group our people, because we know that most of the people that are here are really struggling to make ends meet. And to get 800 rand to go to the border and come back is quite heavy. But we are trying, we are really making progress.
Both of you are assuming that these elections are going to be the thing that solves the problems. There have been many elections before, and people were hopeful, especially the one 2008 where people thought that Tsvangirai had won the election, and that ZANU-PF always finds a way to make things work for them. They suffered a government of national unity for a while, but after that they came back. What's going to be different now?
I think let's put the conversation you are raising into perspective. First of all, the greatest rigger of elections has never been ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF has never rigged an election to the extent that the Zimbabwean people have rigged the election. Here are the arithmetic figures. In the last election, 3 million people voted. 2 million for ZANU-PF, 1 million for MDC. There is 4.5 million virgin unregistered voters, all under the age of 40. So that's the real rigging. What ZANU-PF has done is it has taken its small contingent of supporters, gotten them to vote. MDC has done the same thing, but there's a new class, a new generation altogether. This is the generation, like the generation he's speaking about, that's in this country, that's in the diaspora. We're working together with the Zimbabwe Exiles Forum, James Busha and Tafazo. We've put $300,000 is now on the table to mobilize Zimbabweans to get them to the nearest border. Commissioners are now on site. It's Zimbabweans organizing themselves to vote. So what will make the vote different? It's simple. You can't rig an unriggable match. MDC has won many seats for over 20 years. I can tell you of Nelson Chamisa. I can tell you of Jesse Majome. I can tell you of Tendai Biti, who for 20 years, they've defeated ZANU-PF for one reason and one reason alone. When you mobilize your voting class, you can't rig 80% and say it was 10, but you can rig 10 and say it was 15. So we rig our own elections. But this time around, mark my words, Mr. Ndoro, mark my words, ZANU-PF, even if they rig this election, they will not get away with it. Zimbabweans will not let them. And I can tell you for certain, Grace Mugabe will never be my president.
So today, the airport was renamed Robert Gabriel International, Robert Mugabe International Airport. Yes. These are things that he's leaving behind his legacy. Are they going to stay, or are you going to reverse a lot of the things that have happened over the years?
Well, if we look at Robert Mugabe International Airport itself, it is a dilapidated institution that bears testament to the leadership failure of the man himself. So he has actually made a mockery of himself by naming such a dilapidated an airport that has never been improved or renovated. He goes and put his own name there. If we had left it like Harare, I think it would have made sense. So what we are thinking and what we are hoping for, that airport in a new Zimbabwe should be actually destroyed or left to be an elephant in the dark, and we build a proper airport for the people of Zimbabwe.
I think the real story to pay attention to when you're speaking about the airport is the 153 million they want to invest into the so-called refurbishments of it. This airport is not working. We are currently in a currency crisis where we don't have cash in the country. $200 million of bond notes are in the market right now, which is supposed to be backed by gold. If we took the same $153 million, if we put that towards our gold reserves and we're able to get gold and put gold in our refineries, we'll actually be able to have a currency, which means we'll be able to trade. So we are unable to trade because ZANU-PF has shown this. They are extremely reckless in their budgeting. They don't care about international appeal anymore. They're literally like a...
Mr. Lumumba, I'm going to have to catch you there. We've run out of time, but I'm sure we'll have further conversations. And I think it's never been in doubt that, you know, the intelligent people are there, the people that can save the country. But the big issue is going to be, is this machine, the state, ZANU-PF, going to allow that? But that's a question for another day. We'll have that conversation. That was Acie Lumumba and Tino Mambeu speaking to us about the hopes that they have for the future. Right, let's take a look and see what some of the messages that have been coming through from you on Twitter. Azim says our continued trait of renaming things by Mugabe may end up seeing our Zimbabwe renamed to the Republic of R.G. Mugabe. Believe me, the next thing to happen. Okay, Tatenda Mashanda says, Dear Zimbabwe, sometimes tragedies are necessary to restore order and rational leadership. Povo Zim says that, and Povo is Portuguese word, of course, for the people, so it's a proletariat. Povo Zim says it took Zimbabwe 7 years to pay $108 million to the IMF. Meanwhile, Mugabe has an annual travel budget of over $33 million. And the last message that's come through on Twitter, Philip Taylor says that Robert Mugabe has renamed the Zimbabwe airport to honor in lavish ceremony the man who wrecked our economy. All right, thanks very much indeed for those messages. Let's continue with our coverage and looking at Zimbabwe. Francis.